Okay, so looking at the anterior pituitary, so again, if you kind of note where the anterior pituitary, if you look, I'll have this picture on all the individual slides. So kind of take a look at it and reference, because again, knowing the anatomy is going to be important. So with the anterior pituitary gland, there's multiple hormones here. So we have growth hormones. So growth hormones do a couple different things. Number one, obviously, one of the primary things that growth hormones do is they basically increase the size of tissue in the body. So they're used for growth and development. They're used for protein synthesis. They also help to break down the use of fats as energy, so they do act as an energy source. And then if you look, there's other factors as well. It stimulates insulin-like growth factors from the liver. I'd already mentioned the protein synthesis, so that along with growth, it also helps to regulate metabolism. So those are some of the different things you get with growth hormone, and again, some of the energy production, particularly from the breakdown of fats. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, this helps to stimulate glucocorticoid secretion from the adrenal cortex. So one thing to look at is that some of these different glands, they kind of work with one another in order to produce a response. So the adrenocorticotropic hormone is released from the anterior pituitary, but it actually causes another endocrine gland, the adrenal glands, to produce a hormone that secretes. So that's kind of another connection to see as you're kind of going through with this physiology. So adrenocorticotropic hormone stimulates glucocorticoid secretion from the adrenal cortex, and that's usually in response to stress. Beta endorphins, so beta endorphins stimulate analgesia. So this is something that analgesia is just pain relief. So, for instance, when people get injured, it's kind of the body's way to try and help and attempt to control pain. And in rehabilitation, certain modalities will get used to help alleviate pain by kind of stimulating the release of this in the body. Thyroid stimulating hormone, so just the name itself obviously tells you that this stimulates the thyroid gland, and this will help to stimulate thyroid hormone release from the thyroid gland. So thyroid stimulating hormone is released from the anterior pituitary, and it's used to help stimulate the thyroid gland. Then you have follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone stimulates growth of the follicles in the ovaries. So this helps with the female reproductive cycle. It stimulates the ovum and also helps in males for sperm production. So this works in both males and females. And again, make sure you note what the different responsibilities are there. Luteinizing hormone is another hormone that actually acts in reproduction as well. It stimulates ovulation as well as secretion of the different sex hormones in the gonads, that being the ovaries and testes. And then you have prolactin. The primary thing with prolactin is in pregnant females, it stimulates the mammary glands. It also helps in maintaining secretions of progesterone. So this is something that in females, particularly when they're pregnant, will be a hormone that is utilized. Okay, now looking at the posterior pituitary. So we're going to look at two hormones in the posterior pituitary. You have antidiuretic hormone, or what's also known as ADH. So what antidiuretic hormone does is it increases the contraction of the smooth muscle and the reabsorption of water by the kidney. So essentially what ADH does is it helps to reabsorb water. So when if you think of the name antidiuretic, if something is a diuretic, it makes you urinate more. What antidiuretic hormone does is it helps you to hold on to water. So when the body senses that it's starting to dehydrate or doesn't have enough, what it actually does is it'll increase your blood volume and also increase your blood pressure by kind of helping the body to retain water. So antidiuretic hormone. The other one we're going to look at is oxytocin. This stimulates uterine contractions, and this also stimulates the release of milk by the mammary gland. So this is something that will be in high concentration, particularly when a female is pregnant. Okay, moving on to the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland, now, in general, what the thyroid gland is going to do, one of the big things is to help regulate metabolism, and that's going to be through some different functions. So thyroxine is going to be one of the primary thyroid gland endocrine hormones. So this stimulates oxidative metabolism in the mitochondria and cell growth. So it just helps to increase metabolism. It just helps with growth and development. The other thyroid gland we're going to look at is calcitonin. So now calcitonin reduces calcium phosphate levels in the blood. So what that basically means is the body obviously wants to maintain an optimal amount of calcium flowing through the blood for proper muscle contraction and other functions. Well, what this does is when it recognizes that the body has enough calcium in the blood, it actually helps to decrease the demineralization of bone. Obviously, bone is where we get a lot of our calcium from. So to actually reduce the amount of bone that we're using for calcium, and what that does is it just helps to kind of regulate how much calcium, because you don't want to have too much calcium in the blood either, because that could obviously be problematic as well. So what calcitonin does is helps to basically reduce. So once it reduces the amount of calcium phosphate levels in the blood, once it realizes that there's too much there. Glands. If you look at the parathyroid glands, you can see them right here. They're on each side of the thyroid gland. The parathyroid glands secrete parathyroid hormones. So this one's really easy as far as the hormone, but now the key is understanding how it works. So the parathyroid hormone increases blood calcium. So we just talked about one that reduces the amount of calcium in the blood. Parathyroid hormone will increase it, and basically it's going to increase it by demineralizing bone. So this will actually utilize, so now when the body senses the calcium levels are low, it will take calcium from the bone to help increase that, because that's going to be the immediate source. So again, one of the things I had mentioned was, again, you don't want to just turn this into a complete memorization act. You want to make sure that you can recognize kind of how these hormones work together. So this is where I think, hopefully this video will help with some of this. So calcitonin secreted by the thyroid gland decreases the amount of calcium in the blood. Parathyroid hormone secreted by the parathyroid gland increases the calcium in the blood. So those are two hormones that will work together again to help maintain that homeostasis in the body. All right, the pancreas. You can see the pancreas, again, kind of located right in here, back and behind the liver, up in the upper left quadrant of the body. So what the pancreas does is secretes, we're going to look at two particular hormones from the pancreas, insulin. We kind of already talked about insulin, and this becomes a really important thing when you look at exercise. So what insulin basically does, and the insulin kind of works various places throughout the body, it helps to increase the glucose transport out of the blood and into the cells. So it allows our cells to be able to uptake glucose so that we could use it as an immediate source of energy. So it actually reduces the blood glucose, so it decreases blood glucose. So again, I had said when we eat something, particularly something very high in sugar, insulin will increase. And the reason why is it's trying to take that sugar out of our blood and take it into the cells. Again, some of the other functions, if you look in the textbook, it also helps to suppress fat oxidation. So it basically will reduce the amount of fat that gets utilized for energy. And it's also involved in protein synthesis. Now, again, we have, this constant back and forth with trying to regulate things. Glucagon now does the opposite. Glucagon actually will increase blood glucose levels. So insulin decreases, glucagon increases. So what we get is now here we get a breakdown of glucose and glycogen. So glycogen is just a stored form of glucose. So we store glucose in various forms throughout the body. This helps to release it from our liver, and also helps to release it from the blood as well. It helps to release glucose into the blood, and also helps to release some of the fat stores as well. So again, here, you see again insulin. So insulin will reduce our blood sugar levels. Glucagon will actually increase our blood sugar levels. Okay, so looking at the adrenal glands, there's two parts of the adrenal glands we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the adrenal cortex first. So the adrenal glands are kind of hard to see here. If you look at the picture, they're kind of hidden. They actually sit right atop on each kidney. So right where, if you're looking at the pointer, right on top of each kidney, you have an adrenal gland. So the adrenal gland is going to be responsible for two primary groups of hormones, and you just have to know the groups. The glucocorticoids, which are going to be a group of hormones that are catabolic and anti-anabolic. So they promote protein breakdown and actually inhibit the formation of proteins. They also help to conserve blood glucose concentrations by stimulating the conversion of proteins into carbohydrates. The primary source that they actually utilize that help to break down for energy is they help promote fat oxidation. So they promote the use of fats for energy. That's what they're talking about as far as fat oxidation. The other thing is they also suppress the immune system. So they kind of get released during the stress response. So which we need to have happen because it helps our bodies get back to homeostasis. Obviously, if too much of this is some of what we talked about in class, if the body's kind of stressed too much, it basically becomes an issue in as far as some of the stresses on the body, particularly the suppressed immune system. And one of the big things that they tend to kind of help with is they have anti-inflammatory effects. So the anti-inflammatory effects just kind of help again the body get itself back to homeostasis when it's under some form of stress. The mineralocorticoids, so this is a group of hormones, one of the more prominent ones being aldosterone. They just increase body fluids via sodium potassium retention. So they work with the kidneys to help reabsorb water and sodium ions again once the body notices that those particular individual levels are low inside the body. So one particular thing to note here. So again, we look at energy sources and we look at exercise. So what glucocorticoids actually do, they actually function as insulin antagonists. So what they do is they counter the activity of insulin. So what glucocorticoids look to do is actually increase the blood glucose levels as opposed to what insulin does. Insulin helps to reduce. So, and again, this would be in response to a stressful situation with the body. And we're primarily looking at just one thing with the liver. We're primarily just looking at the insulin-like growth factors, which we'll talk a little bit about in class. Insulin-like growth factors just help with increased protein synthesis in the cells. So particularly as in regards to resistance training, that helps to again help with the growth and development of muscle through resistance training. Okay, the other part of the adrenal glands, the adrenal medulla. So the adrenal medulla has a couple different hormones here. Epinephrine. So epinephrine is another hormone that gets secreted in response to stress. So everyone talks about adrenaline. Well, epinephrine is essentially the body's adrenaline. It increases cardiac output, increases blood sugar and glycogen breakdown, and also increases fat metabolism. So again, this is going to be an increased response to stress. So if you think about exercise, epinephrine is obviously going to be released in response to exercise because it's going to help break down our immediate sources of energy. So it's going to also help increase our heart rate, increase our blood flow to the muscle, which is also then going to decrease the blood flow to the internal organs. So that's some of the functions of epinephrine. Norepinephrine is essentially basically the nervous system's version of epinephrine. It has all the same properties, so it helps with a lot of the same functions as epinephrine. It also helps to constrict blood vessels as well. and then you have proenkephalin fragments. So proenkephalin fragments basically just help, again, with analgesia effects similar to the beta endorphins that we talked about earlier from the anterior pituitary gland. They also help to enhance immune cell function. So these also help with the immune system. Okay, so the ovaries and the different sex hormones produced. Estradiol, this helps to stimulate the development of the female sex characteristics. So in female development, it helps with that. You also have progesterone getting secreted. This also stimulates female sex characteristics. It also helps to stimulate the mammary glands and also helps when in maintaining pregnancy. So these are increased in response to females becoming pregnant. Okay, the male sex hormones, and we're talking about testosterone. This is one of the most anabolic hormones. It's anabolic and anti-catabolic. It promotes amino acid incorporation, which is basically the building blocks of the proteins. And obviously, we know the stimulation of growth and development of the male sex characteristics. So testosterone works in that regard. Obviously, there is also testosterone produced in the female as well from the adrenal gland. So this doesn't just get released by the testes. There is a small amount of circulation in the female as well, but this is the primary male sex hormone. And in the heart, particularly the atrium, atrial peptide is a hormone, and this just helps to regulate sodium, potassium, and fluid volume, because again, regulating fluid volume is going to help maintain a certain amount of blood circulating throughout the body. And then the kidneys, so the kidneys function with this as well. Renin helps to regulate kidney function. It also helps to regulate permeability and the amount of solutes. So renin, what renin does in particular, one of the things it does is with the kidneys, it helps to in regulating blood pressure as well, and that's again going to be a function of noting the amount of fluid balance in the body. So that kind of wraps up all of the different, again, it's just a little review. It's just another way to kind of look at this. And I mentioned some other functions that might just help you kind of remember. Again, not only just try to memorize the chart, but also kind of understand how these hormones kind of work with one another. So I mentioned some ties as far as, how different hormones interact with certain body functions. Again, let's go back to just something like blood calcium. Okay, so again, we want a certain amount of calcium level present in the blood. When we look at the two hormones that regulate that, they come from two different glands. So look at some of those functions. Again, kind of note particularly the energy sources as well. Some of that we're going to still be talking about in class in response to exercise, but kind of note that as we kind of go throughout our discussion.